segment. Welcome back to Speech. Why do I have my guitar strapped on? Any ideas?
You're going to give us a demonstration how to do an informational speech?
Yes. And a very important part of this speech that you're going to give is putting all your gum in your mouth before you start talking. That's one thing. A visual, something to look at, something that gives us some information, similar to your introductory speech, where I asked you to bring some kind of visual. And of course, you want that visual to be somewhat recognizable, and if not, you immediately have to kind of explain what it is. So I brought this in today because I thought, well, we're going to talk about the informational speech. I might as well use it as an exhibition item to get you going and thinking about that speech. And along those lines, what I'm going to do first is get you to pass this outline around to everybody. Emily, right? Okay. Actually, let me check. So we know Emily's here. Jacob, what happened to Jacob? Maybe he's watching on TV. Other Emily is here. Kenyon is back there. Maddie. I was thinking that was you. And Jacob, obviously. Wait, do I have two Jacobs? And neither one of them are here. That's you. Oh, so which one are you? Okay, so you're the second one. That's what I was thinking. Get confused when I have two people by the same name. So I have two Jacobs and two Emilys in this class. Ari, she's the one that sits back there, I think, in the corner, right? Okay. And then Wyatt. Made it. Hey, Wyatt. Glad you rolled in. Braden, over here. Olivia is back there. Laura, back there. And Maggie, right here. Okay, good. All right, we have a better idea. I like to keep track of the attendance just so I can see, so I can learn your names, and then also get to the end of the semester what really happened. Did you make it to classes or not? And I always like to keep track of that myself. Okay, so listening. Before we start talking about your informational essay today, I want to talk a little bit about listening and the different kinds of listening that we have. So in this class, we're listening for a few reasons. One, because we have to. We're in this class, people are giving speeches, people are going to be talking to us. But when we break down listening, typically there's four kinds. There's appreciative listening, where you're just listening to appreciate whatever it is that's going on. Maybe you don't have a big investment in it, but maybe you go to a concert and you're just listening to the music. Or maybe you go hear a guest lecture just to hear what's going on. Maybe you go, like last night when they had all the former presidents of Rogers State University were here on campus and they gave a talk last night in the DCTC. And so maybe you would go just to see what they have to say. So appreciative listening is really just for your pleasure or enjoyment. Then we have empathetic listening. Empathetic listening. Now I've talked about empathy in here already, which is where you have some sense of what somebody else feels like. And so an empathetic listener is when your friend has had a really difficult day and they just need to vent a little bit. They need somebody to vent to. And you get elected because they know that you're a non-judgmental listener, you're their friend, and so you're going to be an empathetic listener. They don't want to contact somebody that's not going to be empathetic, and this is one of the things about being a manager, for example, is often managers are not there to really even solve a person's problems, they're just there to listen to the person's problems. That's what I do a lot of as department head. Is whatever anybody's feeling and has to say is valid for them. And so a lot of times people don't want you to fix them, they just want you to hear them because they're already working out what the solutions are. So empathetic listening is being able to provide some emotional support. Like a psychiatrist or a therapist, listens empathetically. A good friend listens empathetically. Your parents maybe listen empathetically, depending on whether they're frustrated with you or happy with you, depending on what's happening in your life. Then there's comprehensive listening. We do a lot of that in school. We're trying to take all this information in and understand it. So that idea of listening for enjoyment or pleasure, the idea of listening empathetically to provide emotional support, then that idea of comprehensive listening, trying to take it all in. Then the last one is critical listening. Critical listening is where you have your critical thinking cap on, and critical thinking is that ability to parse out the facts and then make educated decisions based on the facts, not on the emotions. This is one of the hardest things we have to do as educated intellectual people, is keep our emotions in check and see if we can base our thinking on rational facts. One of the things that's really important is being able to be a good listener in any environment. There are plenty of examples of poor listening habits. That is not concentrating, not writing, perhaps, taking notes. I just saw a feature this morning on, I think it was the local news. There is a book out now called The Digital Delusion. And what that book shows is that for the last 15 years, test scores and intellectual scores and smart scores in every category have gone down. Gen Z, which you're all in, I'm guessing, right? You're all Gen Z bunch. First time since they've been recording test scores that they've gone down. So Gen Z is, by the test scores, less educated and less smart than every generation before that. Why is that? Well, what the researcher says, it's because in 2010, pads and computers were introduced in all schools so that every child had a tablet. Every child had access to a computer. So as a result of that, people don't write as much. And of course, being from a different time and all of that, when we took classes, we just were so stressed out about everything. We wrote everything down, everything that was on the board, everything the teacher said, everything. And our notebooks were full. And then when it came time to study for the exam, which you always had to write, you poured over those notebooks and all that information to study, to get ready to go take these handwritten exams. Doesn't really happen anymore. But we know through studies that handwriting helps you remember things better than typing them, because your brain has to do all kinds of things to get you to put words on the page. And we remember better. It helps our brain better. But this is something we as teachers should know. Not only is Gen Z less academically prepared because of this digital revolution and or digital dilution that I was talking about earlier, but also all y'all went through COVID and lost 2 years of daily in-person school activity and learning. So these are realities that we're working with. That's why AI is coming into play now, and there's even more concern about that. I just met with a book rep yesterday. Your new textbooks that will mostly be e-books, instead of reading a chapter, you'll be able to go and highlight a chapter and then hit an icon, and then AI will summarize that paragraph for you in just a sentence, so you don't even have to read it. It'll tell you what it means. That's where we're going. That's not necessarily bad. However, it's a reality, and you as college students, educated people, moving forward in life, need to know this stuff. How are you going to compensate for this? Write more, read more. And it's ultimately going to benefit you. But I thought that was a startling statistic, that Gen Z is the first generation that's not as well educated or does not perform as well on these tests as every generation before. I even saw an article a couple days ago that some Gen Z students are embarrassed about their lack of ability and don't want to admit it. And so when they get into school, they try and mask it by using all the AI tools to take up the gap where they feel they can't fill that space in. So if you have that kind of thing going on, now's the time to take control of that. You have to take control of your mind. And we talk about something like neuroplasticity. Did I bring that up in here before? Talk about all my classes. It's very important. It's how your brain grows by challenging it. So, not concentrating is a big one on listening. Jumping to conclusions, thinking something too quickly based on how somebody looks or how they speak. I've long said that country people are super smart. They may not be super educated, but they're super smart because they have real world knowledge. So just because somebody has a hard country accent or English is their second language or something like that, you shouldn't think that they don't have important things to say and they're not smart. But there is a difference between being smart and being educated. And what we want you all to do is combine both those. You're smart already because you're here. And now you're in the process of becoming educated. So you get on the other side of it, you're both, and you're ready to lead, essentially. So what we're going to talk about today is your next speech. And listening to me and looking at your outline is going to give you some ideas. The reason I brought my guitar in was so I could just strum it a little bit and use it to talk. If I could bring my guitar to every lecture, I would. That way I could just play a little bit, say a sentence or two, accent it. Sad subject, I could play a minor chord. Gets to be a happy subject, I can play a major chord. That's the difference between Happy Birthday and the theme to Jaws, if you know Jaws. Bum, 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 minor key. Happy birthday to you, major key. So you want people to be happy? Major key. It's getting kind of sad? Minor key. The only way that you know how to do that is by learning what a major key and a minor key is. But with regard to the guitar itself, how many of you play guitar? Jacob, Wyatt a little bit. How many of you play a musical instrument of any type? Just nobody? One? Maddie? Okay. So a musical instrument is a really beneficial item for your life, especially if you start playing it, because it can help with so many different things. It can help with your intellectual development, it can help with your motor skills, and it can also help with your emotional state of being. So what have I done there? I've said playing an instrument is a really good thing for a human to do. That's a thesis. That's a topic, playing an instrument, and it's an opinion that it's a really good thing for a human to do. And then I've also said there are 3 areas in which it is really good. There's a cognitive element that's good for your brain, because when you play guitar, you've got one hand over here and another hand over here, and they have to do different things. And then if you're going to play in any kind of rhythm, you have to keep tempo. So now you've got left hand, right hand, and tempo. Well, if I want to play any kind of solo information or material, now I'm just playing 1 or 2 strings. So your mind has to make all this happen. So anything that challenges your mind is good. On top of that, motor skills. Keeps your fingers nimble and keeps them connected to your brain. Well, what's one of the harder things to do with guitar? They always will say making bar chords. Because if you can make a bar chord, you know an F, well then you also know an F sharp, and a G, and a G sharp, and an A, and a B flat, and a B, and a C, and a C sharp, and a D. And on this guitar, my hand runs out of space. So if I want to keep going, I kind of have to move my hand a little bit there, and then it's harder. That's why you see a lot of guitars that have a cutout right here. That way a musician or a guitar player can go further up the neck and play up here. Because the neck of a guitar From here to here is 1 octave. These 2 dots that are right here that you see. And each string is what we would call chromatic. So just like a piano, the white keys and the black keys. So E, F, F sharp G, G sharp A, B flat B, C, C sharp D, D sharp E. And then it just starts over again. F, F sharp G, G sharp A, B flat, B, C. Good old C at the very top. But an electric guitar has even more frets. And that's why if you see an electric guitarist, they're always up here doing this number, because they can play higher notes. But whatever you learn from here to here is just the same from here to here. It just repeats again. So something like a bar chord requires a little more hand strength. You gotta squeeze it. But then snapping into it is something I've been learning for a while, is a little trickier, being able to just instantly hit it. What's interesting is that there's A minor. Some people say that one of the sadder chords. Well, if you can use a bar like this, now you've got a B flat minor. Now you get B minor, C minor, C sharp minor, D minor, D sharp minor, E minor, F minor, F sharp minor, G minor, and I'm starting to run out of space again. So if you can learn your bar chords, you basically know all the chords. But then you have to be strong enough to be able to play them. What I've also found really fascinating about the guitar is that moving 1 finger, you get different chords. So there's 4 different chords on the same chord. So all of this has been really good for me to learn. I've been playing guitar for about 30 years. I started when my son started. And he quickly outpaced me because I paid for his lessons. And so he, at 10, was better than I was at however old I was at that point, 43 or 44. So we kept paying for his lessons, and I'd pick up little things from him. And then I also had a couple friends that played guitar, and they would show me things, enough to get me started. But I didn't really start taking it seriously until COVID, when we were all locked up for a couple of years almost. And so I started taking some online guitar lessons. And I liked them, but I wasn't completely happy because I couldn't ask a question, because they were pre-recorded, and I got through them, but I still wasn't happy. So I went and started taking in-person lessons. And I still take them now. I've been taking them 4 years now. And it's good to be a student because it reminds me of what you need to do to be a good student, which is to study. Because if you don't study, you don't get better. And in the music world, if you don't practice, you don't get better. If you play electric guitar, you can buy all kinds of pedals that change your sound, and you can do all kinds, but they still don't really make you better. And sometimes they mask a lack of ability because you can do a lot of creative things with them that kind of make you sound better than you really are, which is nice. But when it comes down to it and playing with other people or being more expansive, you need to know more. So I started taking guitar lessons. And I've been doing that for 4 years, and I'll keep going as long as I can because it's good for us, especially as we get older, to challenge our mind. So this particular guitar is what I call my office guitar now. It was my first nice guitar that I purchased. I was in Nashville one time, and I went to a conference, and Epiphone had a booth there where they were talking about the Masterbuilt guitars, and this says Masterbuilt on it here. So it's a little nicer than the base Epiphone model. What I always wanted was a Gibson J45, and this looks like a J45. And as a matter of fact, it's called an AJ45. It's for people who can't afford a J45. And so I was able to get this one. I paid it off after a while, and I used this one for a long time. Until one day I was in Guitar Center in Tulsa, and I saw a J45 that looks like this one, but it's an actual Gibson. And the headstock's a little bit different. It's a little bit lighter. There's some different things about it, but it's the same shape. And it was damaged. And so I pulled it, or I had to go get him to come pull it down because I keep them locked. And turns out that someone had dropped it on this little part here, which is the input jack for the cable, if you're going to plug it in. So they dropped it, and they put a crack right here and a crack right here. And so I called my guitar friend at the music store in Stillwater, sent him some pictures, and he said, well, does it crack when you push it? And I pushed, I said, no. And he goes, well, it's probably just in the finish. I think we can seal it up, see what kind of deal they'll give you. And so I started talking to him. I was like, well, how much you can take off? And they told me, and I was like, okay, well, I happen to have another guitar in my car at the time. And so I brought that in and I said, well, can I add this to the trade? And they said, yes. And so they gave me a figure, and I still couldn't afford that. But being my age, and I've been around for a while, I got really good credit. I mean, awesome credit. So I applied for a Guitar Center card. They gave me one, and I walked out of there with my J45, which is currently at home. And that's my primary performing guitar. I play that the most. But I leave this one in my office so I can always pick it up and play it whenever I want to at night, or maybe bring it to class, or in the afternoon or a down moment I can pull it out and talk about it. Sometimes I have a student who might play guitar, and so we'll get the guitar out and talk about it. So my J45 is what I take to songwriter nights and open mics and when I do my gigs in various places. But I still like this guitar. But even now having a J45, I see the difference. It's a little bit lighter, it's got a little more dynamic sound. It's just a little bit different, but this is still a nice guitar. This thing cost about $800. That's how much this guitar was. So there's so many positives about playing a musical instrument, but primary things about it are the cognitive benefits, how it stretches your mind out, the motor skill benefits, how it makes you use a lot of your muscles, and you have to create muscle memory so you can do things really easily. But the third element I would say is the emotional benefit, being able to just play some nice chords, just calms everything down. And so that's another really good aspect of playing a musical instrument, is the spiritual, emotional benefits. When you hear a chord like, let's see, maybe this one, how can you not feel better? It's like a conclusion of a nice day. Everything went all right. But I would say any instrument, keyboard, saxophone, whatever it is that you choose, a bass guitar, a flute, any number of instruments can provide that good feeling. A steel drum or a percussive instrument, the idea of rhythm and how that can also calm you down. So a guitar or any musical instrument is a very beneficial thing for a human being to do. Psychologically, emotionally, physically, and I would add spiritually. There's a fifth element that I don't focus on so much, and that's making a living. Some of my friends are professional musicians, and that's all they do every day. Play 3 to 5 times a week, either at billed shows, like a concert where their name is on the bill, or at a restaurant where they play for 2 or 3 hours and play what we call cover songs, which is other people's music. And I do a mix. I'll play my own songs and I'll play some cover songs, depending on what the gig is or what it requires. So there can be a financial benefit as well. And I'm a registered performing songwriter, and so I report all of my performances to an organization called BMI, and so I get a royalty check every quarter. And last year I made $730, I think, for playing my music out and then reporting it. And that money goes directly into my bank account every quarter. And so that's kind of nice. About every 3 months I get somewhere around a couple $100, a little under that, like 180 or something. And that's just from playing out about once a week. And that's all really I have time for. Last fall, I'll just say this briefly, I took too many gigs. People want me to play, okay, yes, 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 yes. Then I'm looking at my calendar and I'm like, oh, crap. I've got too much to do because I have my job. Unlike a lot of musicians who, you know, their thing is to be a musician, but I have a, quote, day job that pays my bills. And music is for my personal, artistic, spiritual, intellectual fulfillment. Of course, I write a lot about music. I'm a historian. I've written a big book on Oklahoma music. So that's a different part of what I'm talking about, because there's a lot of benefits from just listening to music without being able to play it as well. We've had that talk in here. So what I've done, if you look at your outline, is I have a visual. My attention getter, more or less, is just hitting a big chord. Okay, look up here, I'm playing a guitar, right? The topic of my speech is going to be the benefits to a human of playing any musical instrument, but my specific example is going to be the guitar. And I talked briefly about why the topic is important to me and can be important to other people, interesting or relevant. We all need something to go to decompress, all of us. And there's many ways to decompress that are not a musical instrument, but it might be listening to music. It might be taking a walk is one of the best things we can do is just go outside. Go touch a tree, as they say. Explain credibility, why you're qualified to speak on the topic. Well, I've been playing guitar now for 30 years and I've really taken it seriously about the last 4. And I play out regularly. I play every week somewhere. If I don't have an official gig, I play open mic somewhere. Like my regular one is every Sunday night at a place called Willie's in Stillwater, which is one of the oldest places in Stillwater where people play music. It's where Garth Brooks started, for example. So that's my home base place is Willie's. And so, as mentioned, this could be a personal experience, some research, or a strong interest. Then briefly list the main points I'll cover, and I've already done that a couple times now. That playing a musical instrument benefits you emotionally, physically, psychologically, spiritually, potentially financially. And I broke each one of those things down. I've restated the importance of this topic and reminded you why the topic matters and how it could potentially impact you. If you can't play an instrument, just listening to music can be really good for you psychologically. I've summarized the key points. A closing thought, end with a memorable statement, quote, or call to action. I think of a whole bunch of quotes, but I'm going to give this one out. When I got my J45, my other guitar, I should bring it in and just show it to you. It's really, I've beaten it up and played it and took it to Nashville and got damaged, brought it back, got it fixed. Still just, it keeps on carrying on. But when I first got the guitar, I told you it was damaged. And so I got a little bit of money off of the top of it. But when I called my luthier guitar expert in Stillwater to ask him about it and showed him the pictures, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about that. Guitars with scars tell better stories." And immediately my songwriter brain went, guitars with scars tell better stories. There's got to be a song in there, because you're always looking for lines that have a double or triple meaning. So yes, guitars with scars tell better stories, but people with experience, and sometimes dramatic experience, tell better stories than those who don't have experience. And so that immediately led to a song that's called Guitars with Scars. And it's on, I think I mentioned I have an album that we recorded and I released last September. So if you look at my name on Spotify or iTunes or whatever it is, you'll see me there. And that song is on there, Guitars with Scars. Another quote that I thought of is a famous jazz musician named Jay McShann, who came from Muskogee, who I got to work with during my PhD work. And I went to a presentation he was doing and people were asking him questions, and they started talking about different styles of music, and he said something that I've never really forgotten, which is there's enough music for everybody. And what does he mean by that? Well, any one of you, if I pass this guitar around right now and you just went like that and made a note, each one of you might pick a different string. I gave to Jacob there for a second, and he started doing something he learned. He was moving his finger up and down the fretboard, creating some dynamic and some change and movement. But what Jay was saying is that anybody can make music. There's enough, music is free. All you have to do is just find some way to produce it. And so those are the things I think about. You have any questions about the guitar or playing or anything I've said? No questions. Well, thank you very much. And I want to encourage each one of you to think about picking up a musical instrument, even if it's a real simple one. If it's a guitar, make sure you get a tuner with it. Well, every one of you have a tuner right in front of you, which is your phone. So there are all kinds of tuner apps that you just download and turn it on and start tuning your strings. and your guitar is ready to go. Myself, I have what's called an in-hole tuner. So if I pull it out, I know I'm going to drop it in there. I'm going to try and get it out. It's this little guy here. Oh, let me put this on the screen as a demonstration. Let's see if the camera works. There we go. So this goes in the sound hole. It looks like it's upside down there. And you can kind of see it blink on. Let's see if I can get it in focus. There we go. So now it's on, and let's see if it's close enough to work. It's got to be touching the guitar for it to actually work. I'm trying to make this work for you. Let's go down there, get the glare off. I'll see if it works. Yeah, see? Just a tiny bit flat, we would say. Wait, I just turned it off, didn't I? Okay, we'll try it again this way. See, it's right on E. Just a little bit low. I only have 2 hands, so I can't tune it, but that, you want the little green line to be on both sides. There's the B, a little bit flat. Of course, it's not in the guitar. That's a G. Okay, well, so anyway, what I would do if I can make it happen, I'd put that there, and that's why I look inside of it and tune with this thing on. A lot of times what you'll see is something sticking off the end down here. It's a big circle, and so guitarists will use that. But personally, I don't like a big thing sticking off the end of the neck, so these in-hole ones are nice, a nice substitution for that. Okay, having said that, now you should start to have some ideas about what you want to do. And I want to get to the back of this particular section here. Now remember that I showed you the other day that if you're not sure what you're doing and you're stressed out, we want to use your AI. Just go right in like everybody does and say, how do I do a speech on whatever your subject is? Provide me an outline for a 5-minute speech, 3 to 5 minute speech on whatever it is you've decided that you're going to talk about. A few things to think about. Don't underestimate what we know. So if I were to walk in here, okay, everybody knows what a bar chord is, right? Well, of course you don't know what a bar chord is. So what I originally thought it used to mean was that this finger was a bar, like B-A-R. It's not, it's a B-A-R-R-E. It's the person who figured all this out. And so we call them bar chords after that person. We can move them up. So don't underestimate or overestimate what we know. If you come up with a specific subject that's unique to your particular profession, then, or your interest, then you're going to spell that out for us, what that is. Also, you want to relate your subject to the audience. Why should we care? Well, that's what I'm saying about the guitar. I'm not saying you should play the guitar specifically. What I'm trying to encourage is music as part of your life. However you get it there. Whether you actually play it or whether you listen to it as a fan for entertainment. Because when we talk about art, there's typically 3 purposes for art, right? One's entertainment. The other one is information, to teach us something we didn't know. And the other is motivation, to get us to do something. Well, this particular speech is informative. When we get to the persuasive speech, that's where you're potentially trying to motivate us to think something different. I noticed there was, tomorrow a student organization has put together an ICE protest out in front of the DCTC. It's supposed to be at 3 o'clock. And some of my former students are involved, and they contacted me and asked me if I would come play. And I was, first of all, flattered that they would think of me to do that, but I had to say, what? No. Why? Because I'm a state employee. And there are laws and rules about what state employees can do while they're on duty. So Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, I can't express political opinions in public. So if I'm out there playing my, let's call it protest song, and somebody takes a picture of me and posts it on social media, now Dr. Foley, the RSU woke professor's playing his protest song at the ICE protest, now I'm cooked because I've broken the rules. So I don't want to do that. Now, after 5, I could do that, but I can't before 5. I can't in my official role. So I had to say no, and they were very understanding of what the rules are, but why can students do it? Because you're not employees. You're students. You're here to become more educated, and in this situation, express yourself. And so that's all within the bounds of your freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And those are important lessons to learn, whichever side you're on. So you want to relate that subject directly to the audience. Don't be too technical. If you're going to talk about, let's say Wyatt decides he's going to come in and show us how to crochet in process analysis. Before he gets then, he's going to talk about all the different kinds of yarn. Okay, well, we don't know anything about yarn. So you don't want to be too technical with all of the yarn. You can introduce a subject, but you want to keep it to where we can understand it and grasp it. And also keeping things fairly concrete in real terms. Remember, you only have 3 to 5 minutes. You want to personalize your talk. Something that matters to you. So the guitar really matters to me. I hope I'm playing the rest of my upright life. As long as I can put my hands on a guitar, I want to be playing it, no matter how old I get. And he's deceased now, but I followed this guy on TikTok for a long time who's in his 90s, and he just looked almost decrepit, but he would pick up this guitar and go live. His granddaughter, who would ever get him going, and he would play all these really old songs. He would just barely play the chords and kind of get through it, but you could tell it meant a lot to him. And these songs were all in his head, and he just wanted to do it. And people were encouraging and listening back. So if you go on any of the social medias that have lives, of course, once you train your algorithm to show you whatever it is that you like to see the most. So I see tons of guitar players on TikTok. If I go live, it's like guitar player, guitar player, guitar player, guitar player. And so you have opportunities now to learn about music that we didn't have before. Personalizing your ideas. Why does it matter to you? Why is this subject important to you? Because passion engenders attention. If you're really passionate about something, it helps people understand the whole subject better, because if it matters to you, maybe it should, or if it matters to me, maybe it should matter to you. I'd say be creative. And I don't have quite enough time. I was going to try and squeeze in a speech here at the end, but I think I'm not going to do that today. I may do that Monday, or what is this, Wednesday? Yeah, so next Monday, we'll talk more about this, but we're going to have some outlines. You should start to have your outline, and we'll start to do our practices and just start to talk about this whole thing. So, but I would encourage creativity. Yesterday I was talking to my high school students over in Pryor, and they're doing the same speech, and they're already the next step ahead of you, which is they've already come up with their subjects and started to draft it out. So I've got a girl bringing in some kind of dragon animal. It's like a big iguana type thing. So, and she wants to talk about the benefits of this, or no, it's not, the information is about this iguana, what it is and why she has it and all that. Now see, I had another student, wants to bring in their little sister because they're at the daycare like across the street, and wants to talk about the joy that a young child brings into a family's life. Okay, interesting, let's hear it. Another student is writing about becoming a CNA. And as some of you who are going to the health profession know, the CNA is like your starter position of the nursing world, but critical, because they do all the jobs that A, nobody else wants to do, but B, they have to do. They're all the basic jobs of nursing. You do that for a little while, you're like, okay, well, I don't really want to do this forever, so let me get my RN and get out of this situation. But at least you start at that CNA, and she was talking about that. Another student is an artist, and is talking about being an artist and the benefits of art in the same way I've talked about musicianship. Let's see, I was trying to think of somebody else that had another one. Oh, harmonica. I have another student who's a harmonica player, and she's going to bring her harmonica in and talk about the harmonica and why it's beneficial to her to play harmonica. So you'll be thinking about the things that you do and what you'd like to talk about. As I mentioned before, I had a student last semester who brought a whole saddle stand, like the stand and a saddle, and she showed us how to saddle a horse. And she did it we're doing two, by the way. You do a practice one and a final one. So she brought it, had to drag it up here 2 times, and one for the practice, and then you get your feedback, and then you're going to do a final after that. So any of these things are going to be good topics, but it needs to be something you care about. And again, I would say creativity is key. Let's see what else I want to get out to you here. So speaking to inform is something that we always wind up doing, because we're always telling people about stuff, especially people that we're connected to, or perhaps a team we lead, or perhaps a student group that we're involved with, explaining why something is important, giving examples, providing some factual information, explaining why you're passionate about this particular subject, why it matters to you. And then a visual of some type always helps, always. We have basically 4 categories you can think about. Speech is about objects, which is more or less what I've done today, is a speech about the guitar. I think you can also talk about concepts, depending. I had a person 2 semesters ago talked about Stoicism, which is a branch of Greek philosophy that primarily centers on not stressing out over what you can't control. If you can't control it, might as well just like put it aside. And it speaks to me because that's part of another song that I have, just thinking about that very thing. And it was good. He did a really good job on that one. So you can talk about a concept. One of my other high school students in Pryor is doing his informational speech about Star Wars and the life arc of Anakin Skywalker, or maybe no, Luke Skywalker. He's doing Luke, and how he changes through the movies and how that's a paradigm for life. What's a paradigm? P-A-R-A-D-I-G-M. Did I get it right? P-A-R-A-D-I-G-M. Paradigm, good college word. Everybody should know that one. Anybody? Paradigm doesn't mean 2 dimes. No. Paradigm is a framework for understanding. It's an example. So essentially, I've provided a paradigm for you today of the informative speech. So Luke Skywalker's life is a paradigm for our own lives, is what the student's going for. It's creative. I said, okay, go ahead. I have even in the past heard I've heard a couple of religious speeches. I don't dissuade them. If you want to give it a shot, it's the hardest thing to do, because you're really basing your talk more or less on opinion. And I don't want to get any kind of semantic argument here about whatever, but we want to make sure we distinguish between opinions, which is what you think, that's just your opinion based on your emotions, education, and background. Fact is something that we can prove. So, and it's really thin ice here, but the whole idea of God. Okay, can you prove God exists? Well, some people in the religious perspective will say, yes, I can prove it. I feel it every day. Well, okay, well that's a feeling. It's not something I can identify. Well, but it's hard to get into that realm. But if you were, for example, and I've used this example before, a Bible, like you use a certain Bible. Here's why I use this Bible. And then, well, what's the big deal there? Well, most people are not biblical scholars, nor do they really know the history of the Bible. So if we go that way, you use a new international standardized version that was printed in 2022 because you prefer the common language that's in it. Okay, then let's hear about that. As opposed to perhaps a King James Version, which comes out in the late 1400s in the language of Shakespeare, and it's like a little thick to get through. but people prefer that because they've grown up with it. Or you're going to go back to, say, the Greek Orthodox version, the first Christians that came about, the first Bible that has books in it that the Catholics took out. And then the Protestants took books out of the Catholic version, so now you got this modern version that's missing the stuff that the original Christians had in their Bible. Which one's the right one? Well, now you're in a whole big conundrum. And if you're not aware of all this, I'd encourage you looking into it. If you're a Christian person or a church person or any kind of religious person, what kind of text do you use and why? Why is a religion important anyway? Where does it come from? We know religions from study evolved as a result of groups of people getting so big they needed a common set of values and thoughts to keep everybody together. Here's how we think. This is the way we're going to go forward, stay together, and keep our society intact. Okay, good. Where does that all come from? All you have to do is just take a basic history of religion course or comparative religion course. So I think that those subjects can be sensitive, but they're all right. When we get to persuasive, some of those arguments might fit in more. And when we get to persuasive, I'm okay with whatever you decide to do, as long as you're not cursing or like calling people names or that kind of stuff. Because what's really important on sensitive subjects is being able to understand another point of view, even if you don't agree with it. That's the hallmark of critical thinking, is being able to at least understand the perspective of someone else. Be empathetic. Even if you don't think that way, you got to at least be able to get inside of that. And so we all have probably examples of that. I mentioned this last semester when the internet celebrity Charlie Kirk was killed, giving a talk at a college campus. I was not really familiar with him, other than I thought he was an internet entertainer, agitator. That's how he made that was his shtick, so to speak, was to get people arguing. So it didn't really mean anything to me. But my students were like really impacted by it emotionally. I mean, lots of them. I was like, whoa, what's going on? So I had to get into that. And like, why is this person so important to these people? Okay, now I get it. I understand. But then my critical thinking mind goes backwards. I'm like, okay, well, let me see if I can really understand what's happening there, even if I don't accept it. And I think that that's important. And I mentioned that because of the also 2 recent murders that we had to watch, or killings, if you want to call them that, in Minneapolis. Which side are you on that? I mentioned this the other day on Monday, trying not to get in too much trouble. One side says those are straight up cold-hearted killings of American citizens by federal agents. The other side says, well, if you don't want to get killed, don't go out there. So now can you critically get on the other side of that? It's challenging. But that's what critical thinking is. So I don't want you to avoid sensitive or controversial subjects, but I want you to approach them with an even head and provide both sides of what's going on. So you've got objects, events. Maybe you went to a big concert and made a big difference to you. You can tell us all about the concert. You can show us your ticket, maybe some of the artists, something like that. You could do that. You went somewhere, you traveled to an important place or a significant historical place. You went to a fantastic tropical location and you learned all kinds of things about the wildlife there and so on. You can do that. Just a trip would be good. I would also say that you could give an informational speech about a process, but I don't want a process, because the next speech is process analysis. That's where you're going to teach us how to do something specific. String a guitar, tune a guitar, something saddle a horse, something along those lines. Okay, any questions? In that case, we will see y'all next Monday, and what you should have is an outline of your speech and be willing to get up here and just kind of do a rough outline for us. Okay?